Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Wellbeing Wednesday. This is Karen Keener of the Sovereign Mom, and today I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming someone that I have known for years through social media, but never seen face to face. And so it is such a pleasure to welcome Greg Papanicolas. Thank you for being here, Greg. And do you want to tell everyone about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely, Karen. And thank you. Thanks again for having me. It's a pleasure finally being able to do this face to face. Yeah, and I'm pretty excited about it. I know that when topics like mental health come up and things like mindset come up, I tend to talk a lot about them. Essentially, because I experienced some pretty tough times. In my early 30s, and I think for me, my general understanding was the reason why these things happen to men, and the reason why I think I was so affected by it was because I was presenting, in my teenage years, somebody who, probably was presenting a pseudo self to the world, when I needed to present that to people. I knew that I would get good feedback if I presented myself a certain way, but society was kind of telling me to do that, and I fed into it instead of fighting it. And so when you're not essentially rebelling against anything, you're kind of suppressing it. You're saving it up for something that could eventually happen later in a negative light, and you don't know that it's coming. But when you do, and it explodes in a certain way, instead of initiating violence on others, which we don't do as voluntarists, I was turning that pain and that violence inward. And that's why that was happening to me so early on in my 20s and early 30s. Was I was completely not digging deep enough into who I was, and that person inside me was not coming out. And I was trying to suppress it all that I could to make sure that he did not reveal himself.
Well, I think what you're talking about, and maybe I'm reading this wrong, but that in our society in general, in American society, men are kind of conditioned to be a little more stoic and not to have feelings or emotions. And there's like a balance of yin and yang in each person, and when we try to just be one or the other, we just don't feel whole. And so like that man must be yang at all times and never yin, or and then the yin comes out in such weird, like really harmful to your health even ways. I've seen. So is that kind of what you were going through?
And essentially, I think what was happening was I wasn't letting the potential of me, get any practice. So it was anything that I knew would get a positive response and good feedback, and using that as my model and saying, okay, well, if society is accepting this version, parents are accepting this version, friends are accepting, that's what I'm going to give them,
we kind of play to our audience, and in that way it's kind of like that John Bradshaw and the Family said that everything's like a pendulum, and everybody has a role to play in the pendulum to keep it on balance. And so if you don't play the expected role, the whole pendulum kind of, and then everybody's trying to like force you back into it unconsciously even, because then if you start being more fully yourself, then they have to like kind of compensate for that role you were playing before. And then they have to maybe be more fully consciously their selves.
And that's the thing. It almost forces them to go back to that part of themselves that maybe they're not using to their advantage either, because there's also the disowned self. When you're not, everything that you feel is a less than desirable trait about yourself, you tend to look at it and go, well, I don't want to expose that part of me. because then that'll get people to judge me. So what I started to do was I didn't look at that either. I shoved that to the side. So all of those traits that you think are horrible in others that you may have yourself, and you don't look at it at, for instance, let's just look at greed. For instance, you blame people for greediness, but yet that could just be somebody who is good at self-provision.
Right. That's true. That's true.
So,
yeah.
So you're really looking at the negative component of it and not focusing on, hey, maybe he's just trying to take care of himself for a little while, and it's like, I think that when we're not integrating that and noticing the bad parts in others, we tend to look at that and go, stay away. I don't want to be that. Right.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah. And in judging others, we end up judging ourselves, and then we hold ourselves back. It's like, whenever I hear anyone use the word so-and-so doesn't deserve that, or they didn't deserve that, or such and such, and it's like, just cancel the word deserve from your entire vocabulary, maybe, because every time when you say so-and-so doesn't deserve, for some reason, you'll end up starting to judge yourself on what you deserve, what you're capable of, what you are allowing into your life, like positive things in general. It's not just health, it could be money, whatever. You got into physical training, and what else? Like, how did that happen?
So with fitness, I originally was in high school, I was the typical jock. Again, like once again, it's one of those things of like being sort of, batting for all these different leagues and saying, okay, well, I want to hang out with these people, play this sport. And I was the jock that was hanging out with all the freaks and goths. Right. So like, I was still trying to figure out who the fuck I was. But then all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, I'm good at sports, but I'm not like the rest of these freaking jocks over here. And I'm going, I don't know, maybe they're fun to hang out with. Maybe they're not. So I would eventually find myself sort of not involved in any little clique, kind of teeter-tottering back and forth, bobbing and weaving in between groups. And I got involved in sports, and the physical side was the outlet, right? It was the outlet that I needed at the time, the physical outlet and mental outlet, to be able to come to grips with something that needed to happen, or else I was just going to become that reject, because I was already heading down that road of suppressing. So you know what happens? It's like, you're just going to find yourself in a corner and find a little place to bottle up and, bitch about something. And I didn't. So I used that as an outlet. I got involved in fitness and worked out a lot during the season. In the off season, fell in love with it, loved the science side of it. And when I got involved in coaching, I was doing it at a high school, and I was helping kids come up with off-season programs, and they would eventually go on to play in Division II or Division I college. I was sort of helping them transition their high school workout to like a major, okay, here's what you're going to have to expect out of yourself when you get to this school, because they're going to want you to be XYZ. I'd come up with a program for them, and that translated later on to adults, because I was saying I can't be in the school system forever. It wasn't the best place for me. So I figured this was a good outlet to sort of find a way out and get involved in something where I could run my own business, start it, and see where it went. And luckily it did pretty well, especially during the pandemic, which, I wasn't expecting it to happen that quickly, but just using coaching and the physical outlet as, sort of the how I'm going to head down this road with my career was huge, because it gave me that purpose that I was looking for so long, that men, I feel, just are lacking. And when they can't find it, it's very difficult, because a man needs results. He needs purpose. He needs something that he can see and feel. At the end of the day, that's what he wants. And I think that's what I was looking for at the time. And I found it. And I finally figured out that, yes, coaching was what I was meant to do. But the road there was a long, windy road. So.
Well, we pick up a lot of experiences along the way that help us later. It's what was that Disney show where he's like, these Mousecatools will come in later,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
this mystery Mousecatool,
Yeah.
we're like, okay, what is it going to be?
Yeah. I'm waiting.
What is this shit that I'm dealing with right now
Yeah.
going to be in the future? What
Yeah.
is this? What garden will this fertilize later or whatever?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I realized you had, well, I saw a post that you made about the alternatives to like to dealing with mental health
Yeah.
problems or issues and stuff. And obviously we have a disclaimer at the front of this thing. This whole show is not to be taken as
Yeah.
a consultation. This is
Not a
not.
doctor. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but I want to talk about my experience and is, and I see this in the news too. This isn't just me, but with my son with autism and changing his diet and how significantly that impacted our lives. Just diet and even certain types of exercise helped his brain work in different ways, like going on the swing, learning to ride a bike, and having that left brain, left right, to get the two hemispheres of his brain working together, the pumping of making the swing, like to go on the swing by himself. It took a long time for him to figure it out, but once he did, it's funny, these little things like add up to different types of ways his brain is functioning. And so, yes, there is a physical and dietary component to mental health and emotional stability, I think, as well. We read the GAPS, the Gut and Psychology Syndrome. I don't know if you're familiar with, oh gosh, I'm blanking on her name. Natasha Campbell McBride, I think is the doctor that wrote that book. And so that kind of started us on our journey. However, I've just seen how changing your diet does improve your mindset and your outlook on life and the way you feel every day when you wake up. And so when you posted like all these different things that you could do to improve your mental health, like there's so many tools that people just, I feel, get neglected. And I think, was it Chris Christopherson was like kind of, I don't know if they would call it a misdiagnosis, but they thought that he had dementia or Alzheimer's or something. And then he changed his diet and found like, wait a minute, like I think he went with more of a GAPS or carnivore or keto or something like to that effect and started clearing up some of those issues. So you want to talk to the
like
the audience and me about some of the other, because you had a bunch of suggestions and
and that's the thing is I think that the physical component was very important initially for me. So speaking from my experience of going from where I was, in 2012, where you're coming out of a very, very dark period, and then you have to figure out what the next step is. The first thing I did was I got in the gym and I moved, and being in there, actually talking to people that had gone through the same thing I went through. I met this gay couple, and they were just, they trained every day. They were bodybuilders. And what struck up the conversation was the fact that they had been to Greece, and, they had a house in Greece, and I'm talking about my Greek background. And one of them in particular, and he was actually involved in the school system. He was head of technology in that county. So he starts talking to me, and we had just have a conversation. Every day he would just give me little nuggets of, hey, you're doing great. You're doing fine. And I'm still coming out of this dark cloud, but these people were there for me. And it's the people I would talk to along the way in the gym, conversations, being social. And the physical aspect, what I learned later on, how important pushing the muscles was, and this was confirmed 10 years ago in a study, that your muscle contractions are secreting a hormone, and they're secreting proteins that are actually being released into the bloodstream that are actually affecting all these different parts of your body. So when you actually contract the muscle, it's protecting you from depression and anxiety. And that physical component was very important because I didn't make the connection, right? I knew that there was some kind of association somehow, because I knew that if you went to the gym, you felt better. And it wasn't just walking away with the endorphins. It was something else. There was something else happening because it wasn't something that was temporary. You were building on it, right?
Yeah.
And it was seeing the results. Once again, men seeing results, finding where they felt important when they would stand up and actually provide for themselves. And that was a part of it. I had to use that same formula that I used to improve my body to improve everywhere else. I took all those little lessons and the blueprint that I used for that, and I said, all right, let me try this over here. I'm going to try building my own business based off this. And I think, again, like when you realize that you have tools that maybe you don't know are there, it's, and again, you're, and I think it was actually Jordan Peterson that said that there's a sort of a code, like your potential is locked into your DNA. And if you are put yourself in a stressful situation and you overcome it, you're actually revealing new parts of yourself in your DNA that you didn't even know about.
Yeah.
Right.
We're all sitting on a gold mine here and we don't even know it. And so
right.
You're so money and you don't even know it.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Exactly. One of my favorite movies.
But I think, there is a scripture that comes to mind too, is to he who hath shall be given, to he who hath not shall be taken, even that which he hath. But the thing is when we start to notice and put our attention on what we have, it might seem like nothing. Like, I don't know where you were in 2012, what started, what was the cataclysmic event that said, I got to get to the gym, or I've got to like focus on this one little tiny aspect of myself that I love, and we just feed that little thing. Then we start to realize, like you're saying, the rest of these things within us that were like hidden depth, hidden gold that is starting to reveal itself, like that you wake up feeling good and it's like, I didn't know I could do that. And
right.
And it didn't just come out. And I think this is part of the misconception, is that well-being is out there. It's in that magazine. It's in that Ferrari. It's in that other thing that we have to have. And sometimes in seeking to attain those things, we may find some of that stuff that's already in us, and that'll make us feel good. And then I think people get kind of tricked or confused into believing that it's the thing that makes the good feeling, instead of it's the experience of where the gold starts showing itself, and where we start cleaning all the poo-poo, the fertilizer out of the way.
And honestly, I think part of that is the fact that if you're materialistic and everything that's important to you is in the physical, you're probably, a materialist to begin with. And you're probably not looking at anything outside of touch, taste, smell, all that stuff. You're not really focused on the things that maybe you could look at in your spirit, your self-knowledge, looking up how, and even psychology. I mean, I think people that avoid learning about their own mind, I mean, that's the thing, is like, if you knew the depths of what you could do just from, using techniques that I use in NLP every day when I wake up, they're more useful than I ever thought they'd be. And I thought, NLP was only for clever politicians that just wanted to convince you of something over and over again. I'm like, no, there's a positive version of this. And that's the thing, is like, there's a positive version of it to reframe everything in your mind. And it works. And you're like, well, shit, maybe I'll start doing this a little more. And it kind of reforms a different pattern of thinking over and over again over a period of time. And then you eventually see these things, the results of them come to fruition. You go, oh, I put that out into the world and I got good feedback on that. Let me try this, tweak it, make it better. And you're only as good or able to produce how good you are in that moment, how effective you are in that time period, And then if you tweak and improve on these things, whether it's, in your life, in your relationship, your business, and you start to see the positives that come from it, you're like, well, damn. I mean, if I just put a little more effort into it, I wonder what would happen. And if I
Yeah.
learn a little more, I get more creative, what
Mhm.
else could I build? And then that's when that expansion of what else is out there and what else can I formulate and create for the world. I mean, it's remarkable once you realize how you can build on these things in your life and get good feedback on it. So
It almost feels like magic
yeah.
sometimes.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, I thought about that and then it just happened, or whatnot,
Yep.
things like start to when I guess it's the ripples of the effects of what you do for yourself and then how other people feed feed
Yep.
off of that or
Right.
give you feedback on that.
Yeah.
it it changes, it shifts,
Hmm.
and some people just move out of the way and
Hmm.
better people come in, and it
Yeah.
definitely affects your relationships. You might have to
Yeah.
cast some people out.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the classic example of, the old you is what they desire. So they're trying to hold on to that version of you, and you have to let them go. And it's sad because you had moments with these people, but
Yeah,
you're in
yeah,
a different place. They may stay where they are. You don't know.
yeah,
But that's the hard part about growing, is like some of those people are left behind, and there's very little you can do about it if you want to move on.
yeah,
You know.
yeah. Yeah, it's like the contact just becomes less and less, or sometimes
Hmm.
you just have to. Yeah, it can be very hard. I
Hmm.
think over COVID
Hmm.
times, we a lot of people dealt with losing those relationships
Yeah.
that they didn't know, like, didn't suit them because they had been able to keep the facade of playing it.
Hmm.
It's almost like you're typecast, like you're in a TV, you're an actor and you're typecast
Hmm.
in a role all the time, but it's your
Yep.
real life and you can't stop playing this
Yeah.
stupid thing for certain people. And
Hmm.
then during COVID, it kind of like exposed that we weren't really like, or maybe we just were forced into the light, a
Yeah.
little bit. And
Hmm.
it seems like a dark time, but I think
Yeah.
it shined a lot of light on a
Yes.
lot of people
Yeah.
and their relationships. And so I
Hmm.
think now we're dealing with a lot of grief over,
Hmm.
and it's kind of hard to process. Like, it just
Yeah.
seems like sometimes it felt like, ooh, that relationship fell away. What a relief that I don't have to play this role anymore. But there still is,
Yeah.
like you said, there's these relationships that in these emotions and these
Hmm.
moments you shared, and it's gone now. And
Yeah.
there was no
Yeah.
respect or appreciation for the
Yeah.
role we played in their life sometimes. And that's kind of
Yeah.
rough. Um,
Yeah. That's the thing. If it was solid to begin with, and you knew that it was one of those friendships that could last no matter what, regardless of whether that person was where they needed to be or not, there was something, a connection or a love that you had for them that you didn't want to leave behind. They stuck around. It was the ones that didn't have a solid foundation to begin with that were probably the ones that may have been a little bit more delicate when it came to, communication, emotion, and those kinds of things that could really split a lot of people up. And unfortunately, a lot of that was political,
yeah.
and that became that, like you said, that became a big divider uh, in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, and you're saying about like solid relationships, but a lot of
Mhm.
the precarious relationships were with close family members,
Correct. Yep.
spouses. I know a lot of spouses split
Yep.
up, just best friends for life, your
Hmm.
BFF that really
Yeah.
never really saw you in this. They saw you in the typecast role that they
Right.
needed you to fit into. And when you couldn't play that during COVID because it was just
Hmm.
completely an affront to your convictions or who you are or
Yeah.
whatever. It's like, oh, I can't play that safe
Yeah.
thing anymore for you. And then it
Yeah.
was like, oh man,
Yeah. And that's the thing is in my situation, I had, my side, luckily the Greek side, uh, a lot of them were very suspicious, and they were the ones that were, not going to play into the narrative. Um,
that's
but
fortunate.
that's, yeah. And that's nice when you're own feel that way. And, you end up in a situation where you're not worried about how you're going to be treated, but friends, people you work with, it becomes very difficult to have anything unless, like I said, there's something carrying that foundation. It was very important to me to keep the relationships I had with my childhood friend, because he was there with me during that dark period. I can't forget that, and I was there for his, right? So it's like there's something at that foundation that we didn't want to lose our friendship. So and he was on the opposite end of this. So, and I didn't want to tell him, I'm not going to leave you because you believe this,
Yeah.
but it was, put simply, it was the two of us coming to the understanding that we're going to have those differences. I can't change him. He can't change what I think, but we have so much at our core that we knew we'd have to hang on and ride this wave until it didn't matter anymore, and the two of us could get back to a place where that was something that wasn't interfering.
In the pretext of this whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
though, it was kind of an unwritten rule
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
that you had to be enemies with, they were trying to kill you.
Yeah.
On either side, it kind of
Yeah.
felt like, I mean, and that's what made it especially
Yeah.
divisive. Like they're trying to kill you with cooties, and these
Yeah.
people are trying to take away your right to live your life
Yeah.
and breathe the air, and so between those two
Mm-hmm.
places, to
Yeah.
be able to come together is really powerful, because it means
Mm-hmm.
that not only did you recognize your differences, you also recognized the limitation of the pretext of
Mm-hmm.
the whole,
Yeah.
what a gobbledygook scenario thing that
Yeah.
they tried to put on us. It
Yeah.
was just like, well, we're just going to have to put our relationship ahead of the pretext,
Mm-hmm.
which
Yeah.
is, that's big.
That is big, and it affected, I think, more than anything, when that occurred. Instead of someone, going back and thinking, okay, how can I figure out a way to build my confidence back up, build my wits about me again, because again, we were staying home, and people were getting a little bit restless, and they couldn't experience life. So what do you, and that affects mental health too. So when I realized that was a thing so often during that time period, I mean, it was 1.2 million people were
Yeah.
attempting suicide during 2020. I
Oh,
go,
oh,
whoa.
whoa.
So as
I
soon
did
as
not
that
realize
knocked
it
me
was
over.
that
Yeah.
many.
That's
Oh
what
my
knocked me
God.
over. That's
Oh
what
my
knocked me
God.
over. So when I heard that, I said, oh crap. And then it became more than just fitness and all this stuff. I said, I gotta read into this. I gotta figure something out, because I'd been through it, and I wanted to help others. So um, with that, seeing that number and knowing that people were already being disowned sometimes in certain cases from, either their families, or marriages were being split up, and kids were being I mean, you name it, it was happening.
Yeah.
um and then we just sort of all forgot about it and looked around and went, oh well, that thing just happened, and now we're on to the next thing. It boggles my mind that we didn't take the time to look at all of the things that occurred and thought to ourselves, let's reflect, let's stop and think about the heaviness of what just occurred in the last 3 years
Yeah.
before we move on.
I'm still processing and
Yeah.
writing a lot about grief,
Yeah.
because
Mm-hmm.
it's still part of us, even if we weren't bought into it and we just tried to go about our lives for the most part, we still saw so many people just pulling apart. And I think there's like a collective consciousness of the heaviness of all of the destruction of relationships and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you said you went through that.
Yeah.
I'm going to back this up a little bit, because you, at
Sure.
the beginning, you
Mhm.
mentioned that some stuff happened where you felt
Mhm.
like the energy was going inward instead of
Mhm.
outward, of like
Yeah.
this frustration and anger and
Mhm.
whatnot. And then you mentioned the number, the 1.2 million, and then you
Mhm.
said you've been through it. So
Yeah.
like, can we talk about that
Yeah.
delicately, or
Touch on it. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm always talking about it in the context of where I was mentally back then versus where I am now, and seeing that at one point when so 2012, what they say was a big awakening year for people, because there
yeah,
was something happening, something
it
in
was a
the air.
Mayan calendar thing.
And it was the Mayan calendar thing they talk about. Yeah. Yeah. So that massive download, whatever you want to call it, brought people to a different plane entirely, and they were questioning a lot more things. So when I was going through that, I was doing the same thing, but again, I didn't look for an outlet. Like, I didn't get on, a whole ton on Facebook around that time, even though it was available, um, and to really find, some like-minded people around that time that understood these things that were happening. So, you know, you just sort of bury your head in the rabbit hole, and you end up, you know, feeling confused maybe at the start, and maybe not knowing where to go. So, when this stuff is happening, you're really feeling, you know, down on yourself. And that's how I was feeling. It was just to an extreme. So
What was
when this
happening in the circumstances of your life?
oh yeah.
Job
So
wise?
yeah, job wise. So I was working in the school system, and I knew that I didn't belong there. I didn't belong doing what I was doing, because I was philosophically feeling very disengaged from that world. There was a whole ton of feminine energy in there that was consuming, and it was the type of feminine energy that
It's
I
not feminine energy. It's
mm,
women in yang. It's women
yeah,
in extreme yang, out
right,
of balance yang, is
right,
what's happening there. And
yeah,
I think that's what I'm going to say, that is,
correct, yeah,
that people can
yeah,
have their own opinions, but to me, it's out of balance yang
hmm,
energy.
yep,
Like they talk about toxic masculinity. It's not
hmm,
that either. That's also
hmm,
out of balance yin and yang.
yeah,
It's always imbalance, that creates that.
correct, yep, absolutely. You're right. No, that you're right, and I think I was finding myself in the wrong place, and I was teaching special education at the time, and I was helping at-risk kids, and so a lot of the heaviness of the emotion from them would batter me on a day-to-day basis, and I didn't know how to release it, right? So I was one of these people that absorb it, but I couldn't release it back out so that I could live, the life I wanted to live without that heaviness following me around. So it was a combination of that. It was my first year, and then it was also first year of head coaching football, and wife and I were looking for a house at the time. We had my son on the way. Everything was happening at once. And I think it was that crescendo of 30 years of hiding who I was, plus all of this stress, the anxiety, the being out of place, not knowing where to go. And it was everything just crashed. So I ended up in a mental health facility. And from that point, I think I had a very interesting perspective on how fragile the mind is. Because when I was in these, you're going to find this funny. When I was when this facility, first of all, they have to equip you with something physical, like a I don't know, a bike or something to keep people, from not being so restless. So they had a little exercise room. I go into the exercise room, and there's a guy in there, and we're talking. And first of all, I don't have my wits about me. I'm just completely shell shocked from it all. from the mental breakdown. And this guy starts talking about how he's God, right? He's saying, "Oh, I didn't know. I thought you would recognize me, almost like I should recognize him, right?"
Uh-huh.
So the whole time I'm like,
Should
"Oh
have,
God, here we go."
Greg.
Yeah. So like, I'm playing along with it too. I'm like, "Oh God, geez, what's wrong with me? Like I should have known it was you. I mean, I should have felt your energy when I walked in here." So I'm like, I'm just totally playing into his shit. And I realized that like that perspective, like you see the bottom, but you see how there are people who are way, way, way deeper than you. And I knew that eventually I was going to be okay, but I didn't know how I was going to get out of that frame of mind until I actually was able to finally fall asleep. And this is the only time I ever took anything from pharma that allowed me to, actually fall asleep for the first time. Supposed to clear out all the junk, all the ideation. So once that happened, I go to bed that night and I wake up and I feel completely different. I don't know what it's from. I don't know why, but everything is cleared out. And from that point on, from that day on, I was like, I'm going to be all right, but I got to figure out what the next step in my life is, because I got a son on the way. I got responsibilities here. I
Yeah.
got some things coming up that require my attention and my love and my energy.
Yeah.
And from that point on, the building up of the, the story and all that came after.
It's almost like hitting a plane crash. And at first
Yeah.
you have to deal with like,
Yeah.
am I alive?
Right. Yeah. That's the
Did
thing.
I survive this? And
Yeah.
then you kind of pull yourself out of the wreckage and you're going to like, okay, now I have family somewhere. I have to go back and figure out how to find
Right.
them.
It's one of those things where it's, yeah, like how do I get, and it's one of the most extreme situations of really a life transformation that most people don't get to live two lives like that. And I felt like that was two different lives I was living. The first part was that, this new part is that, and it never felt like 42 years of living. It felt like half of my life was this confusing, pseudo self representing something that I wasn't ever comfortable with, versus, the authentic self and the one that's, trying to help people change their lives and in the process change his own, improve his own. So it certainly threw me for a loop. And so I dedicated that time with the fitness coaching to really focus on the mindset side of it, because I knew it wasn't just about helping people change up their nutrition, even though that was part of it, change up their routine, but it was so much more that came away from the conversations. And all of those Zoom calls of check-ins with the clients were virtually about everything other than the nutrition and, the workouts. It was like, it was almost like being a counselor or a just a mentor, rather than somebody who was just adjusting your calories for the week. So it took on a heavier meaning later on.
So you talked about NLP, about like programming it's kind of like cognitive therapy, very similar idea to cognitive therapy, is like what you kind of like have to think different thoughts to have different ideas about things. Do you want to kind of expand on what NLP is for people that are watching, and even for myself to kind of clarify better, since I've used NLP. I have people that I work with that help me through NLP, and I've used it on myself for many years. But can you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really, the taking the words apart, with mind, neuro, language, linguistics, and you kind of look at it as sort of a let's flip the script a little bit from what we're saying out loud to people or in our heads, and change that around and not distort the words that we see come in from other people. Don't generalize the words and don't delete them. right? So if we can look at, a situation where, let's say, someone is trying to quit smoking. Well, you can do several different ways. Self-hypnosis, a lot of these techniques work for hypnosis, but for some people, all it requires is, what do I do? What do I imagine my life would be like if I never stopped? If I didn't stop smoking, could I visualize what my lungs would look like? And then you start really getting down into the details of your lungs, using that visualization and those words that you're trying to avoid, right? Black lung, right?
Yes.
And you really look at those things in real time and you go, this isn't very satisfying. So you really have to put yourself in some places, visually and linguistically, where you start to realize that this is very dangerous. This idea of me continuing this bad habit is potentially dangerous. And another part of NLP is acting as if something is already true, even though it's not. So if you are acting as if you are confident, eventually you will become confident, because all it requires is intention, practice, and repetition.
Yes.
Right.
You mentioned the smoking, and I remembered this. There was like a movie, and I want to say, oh man, like it was called like Breaking Apart or something to that effect.
Yeah.
It was Emma Thompson, Andy Garcia, Robin Williams, and Kenneth Branagh or something.
Sounds right. I think I may have seen something like
Robin
that. Yeah.
Williams plays this really tiny little like cameo role where he just shows up and he's working in the back of a grocery store as a stock guy, and he's friends with, I want to say it's Andy Garcia, who's like the investigator of the case or whatever. And he says something about, it's something like about smoking. And he says, oh, he said, oh, I'm quitting smoking to Robin Williams. And Robin Williams looks at him and says, well, you're either a smoker or you're not. You figure out which one you are and you be that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
He's like, I'm quitting smoking, or I'm trying to quit, or something to that effect, and he says, you're either a smoker or you're not. You figure out which one you
right. Yeah. And that's the thing, is I think I know they call it some type of replacement behavior, that if you were, let's say, you're somebody that they make, maybe not such desirable food choices, and instead of eating, getting rid of soda and cake, they switch to something else that pleases the tongue. So they're trying to replace it with something entirely, in their minds, better, but it's really not.
Okay.
That particular way of handling habits isn't the healthiest way, but I understand why some people have to use a replacement and slowly eliminate different parts of what they desire.
Like a bridge.
Yeah. It's even like, taking alcohol, and what I know some of my friends used to do when they were in, getting over alcohol, like just in AA, they would take Sprite and they would get the lime, because they were so used to the flavor of whatever that their favorite drink that had vodka in it. But as long as they had the lime and the Sprite, they could slowly phase themselves out of it. And they did, but it took a lot more than just changing that habit. It was the repetition. And this is the importance of NLP, is the repetition and the intention behind it, because you can't just do it 3 times.
And it's not like a pill that you take once, and nothing in life really is. Even pills are not pills.
Exactly.
They don't work the way we think they do, like, and I talked about this with one of my friends who is an herbalist, and she was talking about using herbs, and the reason, because she was a nurse for a long time before she got an herbalist, she said the reason why people don't find the results with herbs is because they think you drink the tea once and then get over it. But if they were in a
Right.
clinical situation in a hospital, they would be dosing them
Mhm.
throughout the day for their pneumonia or whatever it was. And
Right.
so they would set a clock and you would take and the nurse would come in and make sure you were
Mhm.
taking that dose at that time, or
Right.
giving you that IV at that time with that in it
Yeah.
or whatever. And people don't realize, set the timer for the herbs, set
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
timer to do the thing and take your health seriously in the same
Yeah.
way that, yeah, so everything requires a dose and a time
Yeah.
and to make a priority is the big part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing, is part of what helped me heal as well was making an intentional schedule, because I knew that if I was somebody who, I created, some things that would help me kind of take me away from the grind, from a grind perspective of just work, work, work all the time. And I created the Vince character because I needed some kind of like, all right, let me do something fun, because this is repetition and grind that I gotta,
Tell
take a
everyone
little
what the
break
Vince
from.
character is really.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. How much make believe are we using here? Yeah, right. He's definitely a version of me. Um, but it's that creativity, getting away from the grind, using creative outlets, using physical outlets, um, and really understanding that there's a lot more to learn about yourself than maybe what you've allowed yourself to believe. So I think using all those techniques, and even with my courses, I really try to work and list as many of these techniques and tools as I can, because one of them isn't going to work for one person, but three others could, or one could be really, really useless. And then there could be another one that somebody says, oh my God, I found the one. But there's so many of them that when you go through them and you think, all right, maybe I'll give this one a shot, you have to give it more, like we said, than three chances, because um, it takes a lot of repetition and understanding of what it's actually doing to those new patterns
Yes. Yeah. Because
of
your brain
thoughts.
has little synapses that like they
Mhm.
come together
Yeah,
and they grow. They've actually like got video footage of these things growing together and
and fast forward. Yeah.
things, yeah, reconnecting the dots,
Yeah.
connecting in different ways. And
Yeah.
so fascinating. Can you give me of techniques and stuff for improving mental health for
Mhm.
you that you've used? What your top, can you give top 10?
Let's see. I can give you the ones that I know have helped um, a lot of my clients, and a lot of times myself, because again, I had stage fright too. At one point, I couldn't get on stage and speak. So what I would do was I would figure out who my audience was first. Right now, mirroring is one of the techniques that you use in NLP, which allows you to speak to your audience and relate to them more. So you're mirroring their personality, their tics, the types of things that they like to see. And that's what kind of draws you into them and them into you, because they feel like they can relate better. If you are talking to a room full of, gosh, pregnant mothers, than a hardcore drill sergeant coach running on stage and going, what's wrong with you all, get active, like that's not gonna fly. But you have these, that's an extreme case, but you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
It's the way you present yourself to someone that makes them feel okay, like I could trust this person, they know what they're talking about, they seem to have it all together. And mirroring is one of the things that helped a lot of my clients when they had to do presentations, just any presentation at work, um, using that type of practice over and over again, and doing it in front of friends, doing it in front of family,
Whoops.
you know. And again, I had to do it, for when I got on stage, for Anarchapulco and Freedom Fest and all the things in the Liberty community. I had to use that too, because if I didn't feel comfortable getting on stage to begin with, I would fall to pieces. So I started using that same type of technique to just say, all right, let's try this and let's see if this works. And if it doesn't turn people off, and I know I got either a standing ovation at the end or crickets, I got to figure out something else. But it works. And but the thing is, you're not, and here's the caveat, it's like you're not entirely changing your personality. You're just temporarily looking at what works in a social environment and adjusting it to that.
With mental health, I could technically use this by finding a person that I think looks like they're having more of the life I want to live. Like, so and so. I don't know who I would think of off the top of my head. I'm drawing a blank. James Corbett.
Yeah, right. Warrior person. Yeah, James Corbett, warrior or a warrior woman.
Yeah. So I'm in that. So I'm mirroring somebody that's doing the things that I want to be doing.
Yeah.
And speaking the ways I want to be speaking. Okay. And if I was feeling really low, I would find somebody that was definitely higher up, like more buoyant person.
Yeah. And embodying their mannerisms, and you're not exactly, like I said, you're not giving up your own tics, your own mannerisms, because hey, you go right back to who you are.
Yeah.
But it's in the way you present yourself. I always looked at somebody like Ed Milet, the financial guy that you see talking about. He's talking about more mental health stuff these days. So, and he's having more guests on that have been through life transformation. So I saw him speak and I went, that's somebody that I want to embody. That's somebody that I respect and admire. Let me see how the way I present. And of course there were small changes, because I felt like there were a lot of similarities with tone and presence, but I didn't know all the other parts that that I learned later on about his story that resonated with me too. So it was a connection there, and connections with other speakers, entrepreneurs, people that had been and they had used NLP too, because it's part of the whole business community. You have to learn this stuff and able to in order to just communicate to anybody, a room full of people or 30,000, right? Hopefully one day.
So give me another one.
Okay. So there is one called Window, and it's like basically like you look at like you're looking, imagine you're looking at a screen, and it's kind of like it's a large window, the life you want, right? You were envisioning the life you want. And then you take your current life, the things you don't really particularly care for, the things you want to avoid, all of those things that bring confusion, hurt, things you just want to get rid of.
Okay.
The large screen is still going to embody and present a lot of the desirable things. You take that small screen at the bottom, it's almost like having the lower thirds or something, where it's just simply scrolling across, or something like picture in picture. When they go to commercial, you look at the smaller screen, you want to ignore that.
Okay.
Eventually that picture becomes smaller and smaller, and it just continues to shut down completely till it's no longer there. And you go back to commercial and you're on that wide screen again of the life you want. And you do that over and over, visualizing it, thinking about the parts. Really, it's listing the parts that you really feel like you want to get rid of. And if there are new ones that come up and you want to present those, you present those. If ones that you've dealt with and you're not worried about anymore, you've moved past them, you don't use them again.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love that. I haven't used that one before. I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah.
I've done the movie screen where you step into the picture. Do you know that one too, where
Yep.
you're
Yep.
like watching the movie screen and then you
Yep.
step into it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. There's that one. Gosh, there's got to be 300 plus that I have in files, and I've listed the ones that have worked for me and my clients in the courses, the ones that I know of. But it's like I haven't even gone through 150 to 200 of them that haven't been even touched yet. So it's like
Well,
the
even
more that are
beyond
out there.
NLP,
Yeah.
you're also talking about, as far as relating to mental health, is just
Yeah.
getting in a practice every day of physical things.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so that's, you have the group on Telegram that I joined,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
let's talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So, and thank you again for being such a strong part of it and a strong presence there, because again, like this came as a sort of a test of a challenge that I put out there in order to change a habit, right? It takes 22 days. So here I'm going to try this. I'm going to try 22 days of having everyone work out, put a selfie up to show that they had worked out, and we'll see how long we go until people drop out. Now, and in the 22 days, we started with 11, and there were 8 that were still remaining. So that's not bad. With
Are
with
they
that
are
being,
they are they inclined to remove themselves if they don't participate a day or something? Is that
I
the
yeah,
No, they
yeah,
just do it on their own. They just feel,
yeah,
and so there is that temptation to feel like, oh man, I didn't do it today. I'm not part of this anymore.
yeah. Or you could cheat yourself. You could be the one that cheats themselves and isn't honest about it, and pretend like you're actually doing the activity. Take the picture. You got to be honest with yourself. But then after those 22 days, I realized that people wanted to just continue. They wanted to see how long they could go. So I
Yeah.
just kept
I
it
mean, I
going.
missed a
Yeah.
couple of days and I was
Hmm.
like, you know what? I've just been in this weird funk about this.
Hmm.
I'm just jumping right back in with something ridiculous.
Right. But isn't it so crazy that the more people you have and the more it's multiplied, you really feel supported, rather than maybe sometimes there's just the person in your closest proximity that's helping you. It's really other people keeping you honest because they're in the same situation,
Yeah.
right? And they hold you up and you hold them up at certain times. And that's the beauty of that group.
Accountability is a
Yeah.
big part of
Yeah.
playing, I think, towards the idea of, if
Hmm.
you want to fix your mental health, you cannot hang out with the same shitty people in the
Right.
same shitty conditions, talking about parroting each other in the same,
Yep.
um I gave up on myself today. Oh yeah, me too. Let's like be
Yeah.
huddled together and commiserate, you know.
Right. Yeah. And I'm sure you and I see a lot of that just in sort of the Facebook community, where people will almost like gang up with their own failures. And
The Eeyores, I call it.
yeah, exactly. That's a great, yeah, Eeyore. The Eeyores, they will sit and sulk, but then there's somebody that will be there to say, "Oh, it's okay. It happens to the best of us. You'll be okay." All the this and that, but it's like they will keep making that same judgment of themselves and keeping that negative mindset because they've played the story in their head 100 times that they are a failure, so they will keep failing, and they have identified themselves as the failure and personalized it
Okay,
versus
let me
seeing a
ask
new.
you
Yeah.
something. Okay, because I'm not that person and I'm totally, what's the word? I'm terrified of being that person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, like there's a part of me that's like, people are going to see that. Maybe it's because I built enough of a tribe around myself
Yeah.
that would recognize that as Eeyore.
Yep.
And so if I start to become Eeyore, they'll see it. They'll
Right.
know. They're gonna be like, nah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
not what we want to be around. That's not the energy. And
Yeah.
so I would probably, if I started to identify that
Yep.
with that and started to glom onto it, I would lose a very critical part of
Yep.
my support system,
Yep.
the
Yep.
thing that, and even when I was by myself though, and I didn't
Hmm.
have a support system, there was a part of me that said, this is not life affirming. This
Yeah.
is not going to support
Right.
me in
Yep.
progress or where I want
Hmm.
to be in my life and what I want
Yep.
to do with my life. I don't know how, but
Yeah.
what do you think it is that gives me that, if it's not just because, even if it happened when I was alone, what
Hmm.
is it that separates or wakes someone up to, that is pathetic. I don't need sympathy for my pathology or
Yeah.
my pathetic
Hmm.
whatever. What
Yeah.
is it? What, like, do you have
I
any thoughts on that?
here's the best thing I could come up with when I saw the different clients and habits and how they responded to tough times and whether they were able to overcome it. I looked at it from the neurotic, you know, mind frame of, can you become a functional neurotic? If you can, you will be successful. If it's dysfunctional neuroticism, it's going to be harder for you.
Yeah.
So we all have a little bit of it. It's there, right? We all have a little bit of anxiety, or we are on the extreme end, a little bit of depression every now and then because we're sad about things, or the extreme side. And if we can function through that and shoulder that and have something that we can enjoy and for the time we're doing it, and I think there's less people that will have more success if they continue to look at the end result constantly instead of looking at the way to get there, the fun that occurs as you're getting there. If you fall in love with the journey, we know that that's going to be more that person's going to be more successful. But it's the, if you can overcome these moments of shit, I slipped, but I'm going to take responsibility and be better. There are times where I would say, almost like for me, the negative motivation was helping me even more, because when I grew up, coaches were doing this to me. Coaches were telling you were worthless. Coaches were kicking your ass in the dirt. For some reason, I responded better to that.
You did.
Because,
Okay.
yeah,
That's
because I
interesting.
knew that
Yeah.
it would carry it. I would have the chip on the shoulder,
Yeah.
and I would be able to perform beyond what I thought I was capable of by proving it not only to the coach but to myself. That's harder these days for people to do, because when they hear negative motivation, which I don't do as a coach, by the way, but the way I responded to it was very, I would say that's how I was able to climb out of this dark period, because I just woke up from it and said, and
I don't want to
use that
be.
negative motivation. I don't want to be back there. But
Yeah.
because I was back there, now my perspective is different. I can look at the intensity of what I do, but the intensity of what I do is now in this direction.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like
Yeah.
it's amplified because you went through it. It's amplified now in another direction.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. And it can. And it can.
yeah,
And then there's certain people that, like, they believe that, like, school of hard knocks, is
mm-hmm.
everything. And so they keep perpetuating situation after
Right. They'll
calamity
create it
after
themselves.
calamity to
Yeah,
overcome, so they can
yeah,
feel like they overcame, and
right,
so their new
right,
identity is the overcomer of
yeah,
obstacles. So then we must have obstacles.
right, yeah, yeah. And you're right, because it's really the false sense of something that you perceive as that, but it isn't. But then there's the real stuff where it's like, yeah, because if there's tragedy, family deaths, your own depression, accidents, major stuff like that, that's big heavy stuff that you have to deal with and grieve, versus the the first world problems that we like to look at as the
I
as
would
the
love a
overcome.
life of just first world problems.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Let's keep it
Starbucks
going.
getting the order wrong. Yeah, right. Starbucks getting the order wrong, and that's overcoming, right?
No, to me, it's like, God, how do I pick between all of these vacation rentals?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
There's
This
just
is so
so many. That's my ideal problem. I had that
Yeah.
problem just
Yeah.
recently, and it was
Yeah.
like,
Nice.
a part of myself just went,
Yeah.
Yes, this is the life I want to be
That's
living.
a
These are the
fantastic, yeah,
problems I want to have.
right. But it just, it really, I think for me, that was the big moment of clarity of, I don't really want to live that average life that, society or whatever the intention is of, live, pay debt, die sort of road. I want to grow and become something bigger than I ever thought I would be, and be able to help as many people as possible, leave that legacy to my kid, and have something on your fucking grave that matters. you
I
know
think I think you just hit on what it might be is
yeah,
legacy. And I
yeah,
think that that is something that people that are compelled not to be Eeyores are
mm-hmm.
concerned with. In
Yeah,
I don't know, maybe it seems to
yeah,
me that most of the people that are compelled to be go-getters are concerned with legacy.
yeah,
Like it's a value to them.
yeah, right,
But whereas you find the Eeyore, or even the Eeyore adjacent, tend to make sympathy a
yeah,
virtue. Like
yeah,
that's like one of their highest value and stuff
mm-hmm.
like that. It's kind of a fascinating to
Yeah,
notice
mm-hmm.
that they tend to have people around them, like you said, that
Mm-hmm.
how did you say it? If uh oh, it's okay to feel that way. Everybody feels that way sometimes.
Right, right,
It's that sympathetic,
yep,
and it
it's
comes
chronic,
from a
yeah,
place of love and compassion.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and I think it's necessary to be
mm-hmm.
like, yes, forgive myself, move forward.
Yeah, right, right, right.
But
That's, yeah, and I just talked about this the other day. You're using compassion for certain situations, and you're using compression for certain situations. And I think that word compression, which came to me recently from somebody that I was watching, another coach, and he said that's how I separate situations from situations. If I know that person is chronically doing this over and over again, and they're not learning from that, then it's going to take some compression. But
right.
if it's a major thing that they're going through and they need help through it, you're using compassion. There's a place for both, right?
Yeah,
That
right.
can both be used.
Like we see, like, what is it to make a diamond? You need
Yeah,
that
right.
pressure.
Yeah,
But then you also have a diamond, it's just a raw stone, and then you have to
yeah,
polish it with a nice soft cloth
yep,
to get that,
yep.
eventually to get
Get that
that.
shine,
Yeah. Hmm.
which
To
eventually,
really
when I'm
shine.
bald, I have that shine. That shine will come once I'm bald and old.
uh, I don't know if that's going to happen to you. It doesn't
I don't know. We'll
appear
see.
so.
Yeah, we'll see. Might be lucky with the Greek side, so we'll see. Maybe the Irish side will come forth and say enough's enough. You've
So
enjoyed your
let's
hair for too long.
throw one more tool at us, like just for the sake of doing so.
Yeah, so I think for me, at least in and I use this in training a lot, I would lack focus early on in my experience working out, because again, when you're 20, when you're 20, you're looking at women and you're in the gym. Like that's just the truth. Like guys are going in there to impress them, the women, and they're improving their bodies to impress the women, right? That's your mindset in your 20s. It may still be your mindset in your 40s if you're single, but if you're 20 and doing it, you're not focused on your work, what you're in there to do. And it's a privilege to be able to do this kind of stuff, to me. So when I would train and get really distracted, I would wonder why I wasn't getting the results, why I couldn't dedicate myself further, right? And then once I had gone through the really tough stuff and I understood how important energy work and meditation was to the process, I used to use energy work and meditation prior to the training. So you're gonna find this pretty funny. I would sit in one gym I was going to had a single locker room. It was like a single bathroom that had a locker in it,
Okay.
and you could go in there, lock the door, do whatever you need to do, change. But for
Right.
me, I would turn the lights off and I would play this really, really just they were like chants, essentially. They were the chants and the just some really, really
mantras.
Powerful mantra to rev yourself up instead of the relaxing, meditation that we're used to doing of breathe through it, relax, find some binaural beats to use. But this was on the opposite direction. So I would build up tension in my body, and I would continue to do that over that, let's say 15 minutes. And I'd be so locked in, I would walk out, and during the training, it was almost like it was tunnel vision. If somebody walked right past me, I didn't even know they were there. Like it was just so zoned in and so at one with the weights, almost, that you kind of become almost like a machine. You're not even realizing you're pushing yourself. Yeah, but that's the thing, is like I would lose track of the reps because yes. Again, I wasn't counting anymore. I wasn't in the frame of mind of worrying about the next, okay, when is this going to be over? I was just, all right, when is this going to start to hurt? And then so some of the pain went away as a result, because I was so dead locked in on the pain threshold and trying to push it. So, and somebody today was like, is that something you can develop? I'm like, yes, you can. It takes a lot of practice in knowing that you're not just some lump of mass.
Yeah.
Like you really could build your energy up in your body to the point where weights that you thought were going to move slow, you're moving pretty damn fast today, because you're able to use explosivity that you didn't think you had in you. But it's not just your biology deciding that. You had actually built up the energy in your body to express that and push through the weights in that way. So I started using that, and it was just the difference in pushing heavier weight at that point. It was remarkable. And that's really what sort of tests your central nervous system and how you can really, really build not just muscle out of that, but just your strength, your inner strength from that. Everything sort of follows from that as far as your desire to get back in there, because once you capture that, you're like, oh, this becomes more than just moving this lump of mass in between weights. You really get lost, and you're out of your head completely. You are out of your head. You are completely locked into something deeper that I haven't been able to name or
I think Joe Dispenza's meditations kind of focus on that. Like it's almost like, I think it's I'm Nobody or something to that effect, where it's just like diminishing the idea of yourself,
the ego,
right, or just any of the ideas that have we glom onto things that we don't know have attached, the identities that have attached themselves to us. And so to release all of that allows for a new possibility that and there are things that we are capable of that we just, and I know they said the whole, oh, if you're using such and such of your brain or percentage or whatever, if you were using that, but it's also our bodies, because I mean, there are the stories of women lifting cars off a baby or whatever, those kind of crazy, or refrigerator or whatever it is,
you're right. I think it's that combination of that and your adrenaline kicking in, because when that happens, that's where there's less connection between body and mind with pain. So you're able to push through certain parts of you that you didn't think you could. And thus that adrenaline becomes that one tool that you can't duplicate. Like when it happens, you take advantage of it, and pain sort of goes away and your worry goes away. And you are so locked into the animal brain, you're just become completely locked into what you're doing. And I mean, I find it as fascinating being able to do that. So that's the third.
It is. It's cool. And like you said, it was what you thought you could. Well, when that thought of what you could is gone and erased, and you're just doing something, is like you either are you're either a smoker or you're not. You figure out, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like you're either lifting this or you're not. Figure out
Yeah.
which one you're doing and be that, you know.
Right. Yeah. Like Robin Williams says, or whoever it is. Robin. And this is the thing. When I was going through the dark period, I was thinking to myself, like, what was I missing? And it was a lot of things, but it mostly was the desire to get better at something. I thought that at that point, what I got was what I got. I was lucky to be alive, and everything around me was randomly happening to me, and I had to be reactive to it. That changed, right? I had now you got to go out and be proactive, but it was the potential change. It was the change in the idea of before I was settled into, I'm only capable of this. Did I think that I was going to be able to, do things like have an amazing child, like I have, start a business, thrive in the business, and hold 500 pounds over my face? Did I ever think I could do that? No. But like there comes a time where you have to just keep looking at what's the next thing that I can tackle that is within my reach, make a plan, learn about as much as you can. Don't just be a lifelong learner and continue to have that warrior mindset of what's next. Like what else can I conquer? And like I said, for men, because we, have sort of lost a lot of the purpose that we had back then of hunter gatherer, we were the ones looked at to do that kind of thing. It's like, in this modern age, what can we do now?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's like, now we have to flip the script and figure out what is the next conquest for us in this modern age that's giving us purpose versus, what used to be presented to us as the thing.
What is the next thing for you, Greg?
Oh, so my, the thing that I'm looking most forward to, especially with, helping, men during this time period with mental health and helping them with their mindset shifting, is, I'm trying to really focus holistically on everything, that not just one piece, not just the fitness, not just the nutrition. I'm looking at the whole man and thinking about how many different ways could I help. Also looking at a book that I'm planning on writing about sort of what are the, I guess I can call them 7 steps, 8 steps from sort of the psychological self-murder of somebody who's at their lowest point to how can you get to your apex, self-actualization and reaching your potential. Like, what are the steps you could take from beginning to end? That's what I'm most excited about, because that's where I can dig into the stuff that we talked about today, plus, my own story, and tell it from a vantage point of like, almost like a manual.
Mm-hmm.
And then giving it to somebody who has healed from something that has troubled them. And again, it's not giving them something where, they're right in the thick of it. You wouldn't give it to them when the wound is still fresh, but it's something to help them along the way discover who they are, the steps to take
After the wreckage.
Improvement. After the wreckage, the scars healed. What next?
How do I get home? How do I get back to my family?
Yeah. Right. That type of thing.
Yeah. They're like, so I'm alive. I survived it.
Yeah.
I'm
now
out of the wreckage and the ruin. Yeah. And now I got to figure out how I'm getting back to my family.
Yeah.
Boom. Greg's book.
Boom. Yep. That's exactly it. So looking forward to that. And of course, just, doing my coaching thing and loving that and being able to help as many as possible. And I find that whereas before, where I was helping more women because it was more of a fitness thing and more of a weight loss thing, as I started helping the men along the way, I realized that being able to relate to them and helping them overcome certain things in their lives, and really speaking with them candidly and them having confidence in that and being able to talk to me candidly like that was something that a lot of men struggled with. But now it's they're a lot more open. They're willing to discuss these things, and they're not going to be judged for it. And that's what I was hoping would happen. I'm glad it has, and it's being able to still help them in that realm, which is all I could ask for, is just being able to help them that way.
Yeah. I mean, there's your purpose, right?
Right.
And you have the group on Telegram, so everybody can come join us.
Yeah. Join and see how far you get. And it's a great group. We have laughs. We enjoy the amount of snow that's been falling lately on everybody.
It's happening right now. I'm like, look at my window, and
there
when we started this call, everything, I could see my roof, and now it's got like about 6 inches of snow on it.
See, it's become a recurring thing inside the group.
Ridiculous. A lot of snow.
Who's winning the snow off?
I don't know. I think it's but it's I love getting out and shoveling it. That's a fun exercise for me.
Oh, it's good for the body.
Feels real.
Right. You could disconnect from things, really be out there. I mean, and I also think, again, like, we talked about being outside. I mean, those are things that people, obviously know and understand, that's such a great way of getting out. And
you would think they would be obvious things, but over the pandemic, they were telling people not to do it during a health crisis. So apparently there were people afraid of people being out. Look, they're outside.
Right. Yeah. And if you were, one of those people that was believing in it, I can't imagine the amount of health discrepancies at that point that would have occurred if you'd followed everything that was said. And I pray that these people can understand down the line and look back and say, this is something that was detrimental to me, my health, and the rest of the world, to everybody else that I came across and blamed. Hopefully we get there, Karen. I really hope we do.
Well, you're helping
so.
for sure.
Hope so.
Yeah, leaving the world a little better. That's how we evolve.
Advance.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me today and sharing like a
pleasure.
gazillion different stories and tips and anecdotes and all that good stuff. It's such a pleasure to finally see you face to face. See your face smiling at me. Oh my gosh, I want to.
Yeah, but this is coming off. After, well, no,
what?
Probably Monday. Well, Andy hates it. She just never liked the mustache, and like she always said, she was like, you look like Officer. What was she used some kind of like Chicago officer kind of name, like Schwarsky or something. Like she's like, just shave it. And like I was like, I know the stubble is more your speed, but I got to get Vince in. There's times where I got to transform, and it was necessary.
Are you going to do any more videos?
Well, I was doing it more for the TikTok thing. I was playing a bad coach on TikTok, and I figured that I would keep it long enough for that, but nothing in the plans for now. But I think 2 short films was enough for people to digest for now.
So yeah, for anybody that watched this and didn't know what Vince is, it's a short film character that Greg plays. That's very macho and very 80s and ridiculous.
Yeah, more for your audience. I don't know about the woke audience. I don't think they would like Vince. So.
Yeah, it's funny. All right. Well, thank you again for being here. It was such a pleasure.
It absolutely was. And thank you again for having me, Karen. It was awesome.
Yeah, always. I'll have some links provided below for everyone to get in touch with Greg, to work with Greg, to join the accountability groups, and to start improving your mindset. And probably I'll throw a couple of his ebooks in there too. So, because he's got a few ebooks that are really helpful. And everybody welcome or thank you. Thank you for being part of Wellbeing Wednesday, and have a wonderful week.